Do you want me to say something controversial? I've made a lot of mistakes in kitchen designs over the years, but I've also made a lot of really great decisions, and I'm going to share all of those with you today in the art of kitchen design. There are so many decisions that go into making a beautiful, functional, and lasting kitchen. Everything that I'm sharing is kitchen design through the Studio McGee perspective. And you can take all of these tips and apply them to your own kitchen design. We'll be sharing a lot of images, and you can see more through the link below. I spend a lot of time in here. To me, a great kitchen is defined by its ability to mix both beauty and functionality, as well as have a lasting look that you don't feel like you have to remodel in just a couple of years. I grew up spending a lot of time in the kitchen with my mom, and it's important to me to have a kitchen that functions well, but you know me, I want us to look beautiful too. So when we were designing our home, I placed a lot of importance on the kitchen space, and I knew exactly how I wanted it to work for me. The kitchen is not only the heart of the home, it is the cornerstone of our design process. We don't start with the entryway, we actually start in the kitchen when we're designing the finishes of the home, because those really influence all of the other decisions that you're making throughout the main spaces. Our clients always come to us with really specific asks for their kitchen. So sometimes it's a coffee bar, sometimes it's a built-in nook area, sometimes it is a wine fridge or a butler's pantry or a second kitchen behind the kitchen. We have done it all. And one thing to note is that even our really high-end projects don't get every single one of those things in the kitchen. You just have to really know what is the priority for you. Three things that make a Studio McGee kitchen: timeless materials, textures, and classical forms. The two biggest mistakes I see in kitchen design are, one, people go way too trendy and then the kitchen is over in a couple of years. The second one is they try to make their kitchen basically indestructible with materials that are all man-made, there's nothing natural, and then they lose all soul and all ability to patina. And really, when you look at high-end kitchens, they incorporate things that age over time. Before you start pulling selections for your kitchen, I would encourage you to make some lists and do some real soul searching and be honest with yourself about how you will actually use and live in the kitchen. If it's hard for you to keep a tidy kitchen and you're not a minimalist, I wouldn't recommend doing all open shelves or glass front cabinets. Maybe you can do a little bit around the top of the kitchen, but you just have to know yourself, and you have to know how you cook and how you clean up at the end. And you also have to know what is going to kind of bother you. Is it going to grab your eye all the time? You spend so much time there, probably more time than anywhere else in the home. So I wouldn't recommend doing something that doesn't feel right in your gut. The layout of your kitchen is the foundation of your kitchen design. Start with the flow first, and maintaining a work triangle is really important so that you get a really nice path, close proximity between your sink, your range, and your refrigerator. If you are working in a remodel instead of a new build, the existing shape of your home will dictate a lot, but I would really pay attention to getting those 3 points very walkable. And the other thing is, if you can start from scratch, I would really think about how you use your kitchen. Do you like to stand at your island and be part of the group, or do you like to stand at your sink and look out the window? Those are questions that we often ask clients. One thing I stay away from when designing kitchens is angles. So I mean like a corner cabinet or an odd shaped island. I would rather stick to simpler forms like rectangles and clean corners in cabinets, because I think that it has more longevity. When you start diving into high-end kitchen design, you'll notice that there are very few angled and corner type cabinet situations, as well as on the island or the peninsula. And of course, I just feel like I have to preface this as like, if that's what's in your home and that's what you're working with, then you can make it work and you can make it beautiful. But if you have the opportunity to rethink things, then that would be my recommendation. When designing my kitchen, I knew that, well, first of all, I had never had a really huge island before. Our very first home had a small island. We could fit 2 stools, and then we lived in rentals that didn't have islands. And so I think I overcompensated when we built our home because I wanted everybody to be able to gather around the island and hang out. And that is actually what we do every single day. We rarely eat at the dining room table. We usually eat on our island, and I spend a lot of time cooking and testing recipes in the kitchen, and I have plenty of space to spread out. When I was designing my kitchen, I kept looking at the elevations, and I had this very symmetrical look on my back wall. I had the beautiful plaster range hood, and then the cabinets on the side, and then this long island, and everything looked too perfect, too perfectly balanced, too symmetrical, and I needed to make a change. And so what I really wanted to do was create this open shelving on the end of my island because I have so many, antique pieces and little cake stands that I've collected. I wanted a place to display those, and by shifting all the stools kind of in an offset way and having this asymmetrical design to the island, it did just enough to make it a little less perfectly symmetrical. And I always recommend that in kitchen design or really anywhere. The sight lines in your kitchen are really important as well. I needed my kitchen sink to be exactly lined up with the center of my fireplace, and I wanted my island to be exactly lined up with the center of my dining room. And that alignment creates a really thoughtful feeling in our home. And when we're looking at the architectural plans of our clients' homes, we do the same. We make sure there's some sort of alignment. Sometimes it can't all be perfect, but you want to get some sort of alignment if possible. The Crestview home is a perfect example of a remodel that didn't have the perfect conditions, but we made it feel very natural and like it was always supposed to be that way. So the sink and the range hood aligned with the windows in the great room. But because it was a remodel, we ended up with like this extra space on the end of the island that was just going to be open pass-through space. And our client really wanted that extra worktop area. So we extended the island, and the island actually isn't perfectly centered under the light fixtures. And that's okay because we changed it to a butcher block and this open shelving on one end, which visually tricked the eye into believing that the pendants were centered over the island. And then we just had this cute little addition at the end. The order that we follow is always thinking about the layout, thinking about the function, and then looking at the elevation. So we're thinking range hood, that beautiful backsplash wall, that is always our focal point, and then we build our drawings from there. So we decide where is that range hood supposed to go. And it's often centered on a fireplace or it's centered on a window. We always have some sort of central focal point so that we can frame that range hood with beautiful pendant lights and then center the island or work surface around that. We go from layout and function to the elevation drawings, and then we think about the materials. I like to start with kind of just like a moving board of things that we're loving. So paint colors, swatches, countertops, backsplash, hood materials, and we pick one thing that we are totally committed to. As the design team, we will look at all these different kind of options and we say, our client really seems to be pulling kitchens over and over that have this dark stain on the island. So you know what? We're gonna start there, we're gonna commit to that decision, and then we're going to build around it. That gives us like some anchoring decision to then build the designs around. When I have a hood and a backsplash, I usually don't design those first. I usually have all of the elevations drawn, and then we do a lot of iterations of the range hood design because it is really the most important view when you look into a kitchen. The materials tell the story in your kitchen, but when you're looking at the range hood, there's another component, and that is the architecture of the kitchen itself. And if your range area is enclosed, are there walls on the sides? And you also have to know, do you want to have an enclosed workspace around your range? It's very popular right now to bring the sides of your range hood all the way down to the countertop, but it also eliminates the space right to the side of your range. So those are things to consider. Do you want open shelves next to it? Do you want a combination? Do you want tall cabinets flanking your hood like I have here? There's a lot of different ways to do it, but we always do a custom design hood because we can create this beautiful moment in the kitchen. And I like to have my range hood kind of overhang the sides of the range by just a couple of inches instead of have it perfectly aligned, because it creates a grander appearance. When selecting the materials around the range, I think that you have an opportunity to, one, match the rest of your kitchen. The backsplash can all be cohesive, but you can also incorporate something different. In our Cabo project, we did a statement tile behind the range hood, and we did this beautiful plaster detail around it, and that separation allowed us to just do one thing behind the range and then change up the backsplash everywhere else. In our spec home project, we committed to a stone backsplash from the beginning. That was the first decision that we made. So all other decisions followed. I really wanted, because it was in the mountains, to get that textural feel across the back, and it really does make a statement. When you are choosing a backsplash, if you're doing an accent, I would do it very, very carefully, because accents can go wrong really quickly if you choose something overly trendy and not timeless. So for choosing a pattern tile, it's something like a hand-painted or glazed tile that has staying power. And you know it has staying power if you look back at images from decades ago and those types of tiles were being used, then you know it will work in the future. Tile is one of the most stylistic decisions that you make in a kitchen, and I think that even the way you lay the tile has an impact. If you're doing a brick lay, it's more classic. If you're stacking, it feels more contemporary. If you are mixing backsplashes together, that gives you a little bit more flexibility. It becomes more transitional. Like in my kitchen, I have my marble backsplash going up behind the range because I fell in love with the stone. I wanted that movement, and I wanted it to tie into the marble shelves above. But an all stone backsplash can lean a bit more modern because it's very just like smooth, and I wanted some texture. So I incorporated a Zalige tile on this kind of accent wall over here and carried it into my pantry. And I love that change up. They connect well together, but it adds some interest because not everything is the same. If you're going for that ultra clean look, then it's a good idea to commit to all one backsplash material. But I think that there are a lot of opportunities to change things up when you're designing with tile. There are so many possibilities when designing with tile. You could do a wider grout. We just did this with our Oaks project, and that was a beautiful tile that got a striped effect just by the width of the grout. Another thing you can do is do a soldier course across the bottom or through the tile. That just means that you're turning one row of tiles in a vertical straight lay across the bottom or top, and then you are doing brick lay or something else above. We have a guide for different tile patterns and layouts on StudioMcGee.com. You'll notice that in a lot of our projects, we have these niches or little shelves where they can only fit like a little olive oil or a little salt cellar, and they are functional because they are within reaching distance when you're cooking, but they also add an opportunity for you to meet beauty and function together. So instead of putting the Kirkland Signature olive oil bottle in the niche or on the shelf, find a beautiful vessel to store that olive oil, and then all of a sudden it works for you because you're actually cooking with it, but it also acts as a styling accessory. I often get asked what the thing is behind my kitchen range, and it's a pot filler. So totally not necessary, but an awesome luxury. It means that I don't have to lift a huge pot of water over to the sink and back. I can set it on the stove, pull that little spout out, and fill the pot of water. It also is architecturally a great way to fill the gap if you have kind of a wide area behind your backsplash that looks empty. That faucet creates some interest visually. Not all kitchens are perfectly symmetrical, and that's okay. Great kitchen design isn't about creating perfect symmetry in the kitchen, it's about creating beautiful balance. I'm gonna show you a few kitchens where the design wasn't symmetrical, but it feels totally intentional. Our spec home project is a great example of an asymmetrical focal wall that totally works. We wanted the range hood and the pendants to line up with the fireplace across from it, but it also meant that we were left with a big gap to the right of the range hood. We decided that to create balance, we would do some visual weight on the right-hand side of that wall by creating a furniture piece that was in a different stain, and it totally works. In our Summit Estate project, we had this massive kitchen, but we wanted that range centered on the dining table and the windows across from it to the view, but it also meant that nothing about what was happening around it was symmetrical. And we designed and redrew that so many times. In the end, we decided to do floating shelves on both sides, but then to create some balance by doing a secret door to the pantry on the left-hand side. And you'd never know that it felt like it was a challenge, because in the end, we developed some balance through our materials and selections. Making cabinet decisions can be overwhelming, especially because it's such a big investment and you don't want to be changing out your cabinets in a few years. And so I'm going to share a few things that we do at Studio McGee to make sure that you are making a wise investment in the cabinets, whether that's a custom order or you're just buying them from a box store. Doesn't matter. You need to take the printout of those cabinet elevations and you need to pencil in where everything goes. We do this with all of our clients. We make sure that we know exactly before they move into the home where the utensils are going, where our pots and pans are going. And then once you do that exercise, you might realize, I have no place to store dish towels. So I need to maybe add a little rod or just be okay with the fact that those are going to live somewhere else outside of the kitchen. Maybe you are like me and you have tons of trays for entertaining. Well, I don't have room for that in my kitchen. So a lot of those, and I know I have a big kitchen, but I have a lot of trays. So those go in the basement. And I think that you just have to kind of know what you're working with and take inventory of what you have, what you want to have, and how you work in your kitchen. The construction of your cabinets makes a big difference in the way your cabinets look in the end. There are 3 different types of cabinet constructions. I mean, there are probably more, but let's talk about the 3 main ones. First, you have inset cabinetry like what I have behind me. This is a very high-end design because they build it like furniture. The door sits flush within a frame around it. And at Studio McGee, we do this 98% of the time in our homes. We are designing kitchens that have furniture grade cabinetry. And I think that it has a very classical look to have that frame. You see that frame even around my drawers here. They're completely flush inset. Another option is to do full overlay. So that means that you're losing this frame right here, but your cabinet door comes across the entire frame of your cabinet. This works in a contemporary home where you're doing like a flat panel cabinetry. It works in a traditional home if you are not wanting to pull the trigger on flush inset. This is a great option because it looks seamless, it looks clean, and this is a really solid way to go. The last type of cabinetry is partial overlay cabinetry. And I don't have any photos because we don't do this style of cabinetry at Studio McGee, but it's good to know when you're comparing and shopping that there are different types of construction and to know just kind of like what's out there, the lay of the land. I always recommend doing full overlay, or my very favorite is a flush inset cabinet. As a designer, you look at cabinet profiles all day long, and I love them. We're gonna keep this simple. So we have a shaker cabinet detail where it has a frame like this around. It's very classic. You can do lots of twists on this. Mine is a shaker with a little bead detail here. There's raised panel. So in our Hilltop Estate project, we did raised panel. This is a more traditional look. I also love this look. I think that people don't do it because they're a little scared of the raised panel look because it's more traditional, but I think it's absolutely beautiful. Also a flat panel cabinet. So my drawers right here are flat panel. This could be done really simply, or you could have a little kerf to it. My cabinets in my basement have the kerf on a flat panel, and we do this a lot. So I think that a more flat panel goes more modern, and a shaker or raised panel can take you from transitional to traditional. The great thing about cabinet profiles is that you have some freedom to add some details. So we have a flat panel here, but you could also add a little bead detail around the edge. We did this in our mountainside retreat, and we have so many images on Studio McGee and in our portfolio that you can dive into and see all of our little details and variations that we've added over the years. When making the decision between closed cabinetry, glass front, open shelves, all are great. I think you just have to know what works for you and kind of look through your imagery and see what you're drawn to. I don't usually do tons of glass cabinetry. It'll just be in an accent. So maybe it's off to the side and it's an opportunity to style our clients' beautiful dinnerware. Sometimes it's across the top of the kitchen. Then open shelves, it's the same thing. Open shelves are usually something that we do to just break up the cabinetry because we have a lot of closed cabinetry and they don't have to be like a lot. I just did one single open shelf here. There's a lot of different options. I love brackets and I love little details that make them feel special. You don't have to just do a chunky wood shelf for your open shelf. You could do a marble ledge. There are so many different options and we have examples of pretty much all of those things at Studio McGee. When giving everything a home in your kitchen, yes, you want to know where it goes, but you also want to know how you want it to function behind the cabinet door itself. If you're doing custom cabinetry, you can think about different pullouts and inserts and dividers, and I love to incorporate those into our clients' kitchens because when they move in, just everything feels so organized and you don't have that messy drawer with it all rattling around. I would also be wary of too many kind of like gimmicky, trendy things that seem to make your life easier, but maybe take up a lot of space in your kitchen. I know that's silly, but you know, if you decide to incorporate a paper towel holder in your island, you're taking up an entire drawer space. And so if you have the room to do that, that's great. But also if you put your paper towels on a nice roll and we kind of like hide them out of sight, then you get an entire drawer of storage. So just only use the things that you know you're going to use a ton. At Studio McGee, we try to integrate everything we can. So refrigerator panels, dishwasher panels, wine fridges, sometimes we'll have a glass front, but we'll incorporate them with a trim that matches. I mean, we try to make it as seamless as possible because appliances can really break up the aesthetic of the kitchen when you have a lot of metal showing. And so if you can, I would recommend incorporating some sort of integrated appliance. So everyone has preferences on how they like to cook, and some people like their cooktop separate from their ovens. Visually, I prefer a range that has the cooktop and the stoves together because I think it really anchors the focal point of the range hood and just grounds the kitchen. However, if you have to separate it, you have to separate it. If I have the opportunity to bring them together, I always will. How do you balance durability with beauty? In my mind, beauty usually goes hand in hand with materials that will be natural and age over time. That said, I think that you heard me say it before. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they try to make everything indestructible in their kitchens. If you're a person that cannot live with patina, then I would encourage you to pick one thing in the kitchen that has some sort of texture that you can live with. Otherwise, you'll probably be kind of just draining the kitchen of any personality. We encourage clients to do a textural backsplash like a Zalige or a handmade ceramic that has a texture if they really, really can't get on board with a marble countertop or some sort of natural material like quartzite. Quartz is different than quartzite though, and is a man-made material. And I think it's fine, but it's not my preference. And so we have that conversation with clients every single day. And so we just have to decide where we can push, where they're gonna put their foot down, what they can live with. If they're going to be mad at us every single time they look at their countertop and it has a little bit of an imperfection, then it's probably not the right thing for them. Choose the materials that work for you. We have a guide on StudioMcGee.com where it outlines the pros and cons of each material, countertop that is, and I think that it's very insightful and will help you make your decision. Beyond the countertop material is the edge profile. You can do an OG edge, you can do a mitered edge, you can just do the slab itself. There's so many different edge profiles. In my book, I talk about all of these things, from the countertop materials and their pros and cons to the countertop edge details, and there's a lot of information there. One thing I would point out in our Studio McGee kitchens is that we are paying attention, we're very intentionally choosing the countertop profile. In my own kitchen, I did a 2 cm slab around the surround, and then I did a mitered, thicker look on my island. I wanted that mixed look. It was very intentional, and I think that mixing the countertop profiles gives your kitchen a more thoughtful look. That said, you don't have to do it if you're going for a more clean, contemporary look. Do the same edge all the way around, but just make sure you've considered it before just handing the slab over to the countertop manufacturer and then being surprised. In our Houston estate project, we did 2 edge profiles in the kitchen. We had a mitered edge on the range wall, and then we did this beautiful built-up profile around the island, and it feels luxe and designer, and I just love how it turned out. It's just taking that extra step to consider the details. Choosing the right sink for your kitchen involves a few considerations. One is the materials around your sink. If you're doing stainless because you want it to just be indestructible, will that stainless sink look good with your dream faucet? They are 2 metals that are going to be sitting next to each other. Stainless is going to be very durable, it's going to hide a lot. I love a cast iron or fire clay sink. We use those a lot at Studio McGee. They're very classic. They are white, and so they can scratch or stain, but honestly, I've had really good luck. They're very durable materials. The white is something that you consider next to the material. Mine feels very seamless because my countertops are light, but if you're doing like a soapstone or a honed black granite countertop, are you okay with a bright white sink next to your dark countertop? There's no wrong answer there, but you just have to consider what they look like next to each other. Another option is to do an integrated sink. So that means using the countertop material and creating a sink out of that. There are different ways to do this. So in our Crestview project, we actually used a honed concrete look quartz on their countertop, and then we integrated the sink out of that. So it's very, very durable, and it looks really good, seamless. It has a more modern look. Then in our Houston estate project, we did the sink out of marble. Not the most durable, but definitely the most beautiful. Another thing to consider when selecting your sink is apron front versus just an undermount sink. An undermount is truly going to go under your countertops, and you're not going to see the front along your cabinetry. An apron front, you're going to see that front like a farmhouse sink. I would not recommend doing an overmount sink. It's the type where it sits on top of your countertop. It's going to get gross. It's not as designer of a look. So if you have a choice, then I would stay away from that. Another thing to consider is if you're doing a farmhouse sink, you can do a designer look on the drip edge. So the drip edge is the piece that sits underneath your apron front sink, and it essentially catches the drips from the front of the sink before it reaches the cabinets below. And traditionally, they are wood. We've used that look in homes that we've designed, but we also will do stone, which is something that I think is a really cool look because it's a little different, it's very functional, and it ties in the material of your countertops. The first decision that you need to make when selecting your faucet is, do I want a side spray or do I want a pull down spray? Functionally, that is really important. And then once you make that decision, then it'll narrow your shopping and make it a lot easier. I would say that a pull down kind of just inherently looks a little bit more streamlined because you don't have all the things happening on the counter, and the styles tend to be a bit more contemporary. There are some options out there that look more traditional, but just kind of across the board, I'd say a pull down has a more streamlined look. I love a bridge faucet. I love a bridge faucet in a modern kitchen. I have a bridge faucet myself and a side spray. I think that you're choosing that because you just love a bridge faucet. A pull down is always going to be more convenient than a side spray, but Man, I sure love a bridge faucet with a side spray. Also, if you have a huge kitchen, you can do 2 faucets. So if you have a lot of people cooking together in the kitchen, that's kind of convenient. Also is just a really great look. Another consideration is if you're working with a remodel or you're trying to just give your kitchen a refresh, you need to know the number of holes that you're working with when selecting your faucet. If you're just trying to swap it out, then you're going to have to work with the same amount of, like I had a side spray, you're not gonna be able to hide that like side spray hole. You'll need to kind of pick a similar shape and just go with a different style. Finishes, I could talk about this for a long time because I get so many questions about it, but I'm gonna keep it as simple as possible. And that is either match all the finishes or do 2 finishes in your kitchen with just 1 small accent like on a door handle. I would not ever incorporate more than 3 finishes in a kitchen. Really, I try to stick to 2. And one way to think about it is kind of dividing your kitchen into thirds. So you've got the top half is lighting, this plane is your faucet and plumbing, and then you've got your cabinet hardware. And a good rule of thumb when mixing your finishes together is match the lighting to the hardware and then change up the faucet, or match your faucet to your hardware and change up the lighting. There are a lot of ways to do this. I have a guide in my book. We have a guide on studiomcgee.com on how to do this. Those are like the no-fail approach to mixing your plumbing. And I would never ever mix the finishes of the plumbing fixtures themselves. So I'm never going to do a different plumbing finish on my pot filler or on a bar faucet than I would on my main sink. You're really just dividing your kitchen into these sections, and that's how you'll mix. Your hardware has a big impact on the aesthetic of your kitchen and how traditional or modern it goes. Typically, going with long pulls or just pulls themselves, that's going to pull your kitchen it's gonna pull your kitchen more to the modern or contemporary look, and then incorporating some knobs or doing all knobs is going to go a bit more traditional. Of course, you've got cup pulls, you've got drop pulls, all of those are so great. I love to mix hardware in a kitchen. I love to mix 2 to 3 different styles, incorporating latches. There's so many different options. It's a great way to change up your kitchen if you cannot do a full overhaul of your kitchen. I think that hardware, it really just it is that finishing touch. The hardware and the lighting, it's just like that last thing that you put in the kitchen, and it makes all the difference. A few things we're seeing in kitchen design right now that I'm loving are islands that look more like furniture. So islands that are all up on legs that have some turning details. Maybe they have open shelving on one end, or they're using hardware that looks more like furniture hardware. Also, I think we're seeing more dark brown in kitchens. So dark brown paint or a dark brown stain. We have several kitchens that we're working on right now that incorporate those things. I also am seeing a lot of Delft tile in kitchens, and that's a historical tile. And so everything old is new again, and we're seeing a lot of that, and I'm loving it. And we're working on a home right now that incorporates that. When designing a kitchen, we always use layered lighting. So pendants over the island. If I can incorporate a sconce, I will always incorporate a sconce. I think they look so beautiful. Also flush mounts. I think this is kind of controversial. Some people just really hate recessed lighting. We tend to layer it for our clients, so we'll do recessed lighting and also pendants, and they usually don't have that recessed lighting on, but there are times when they need it because they need that brighter light, and so this just gives them the optionality. We try to do a really small recessed lighting size if possible. I would just recommend layering the lighting, and if you can at least do 2 types, like a pendant and some sort of wall sconce, I would recommend it. The heights of your lighting make a big difference in kind of making it look like you know what you're doing or not. If the lights are hung way too high or they're way too low, you could have the most beautiful light, but it would still feel a little off in your kitchen. And I have a guide in my book and also on studiomcgee.com, so you can calculate how far above your island you should hang them. the last piece of completing the kitchen is usually picking the bar stool and incorporating some styling. When we're doing stools, I always ask the client, do you want a back or no back? And do you want upholstered seating or something that you can wipe down? And everyone has a different opinion about this, and that's great because that kind of just automatically makes all kitchens look a little bit different. I have young kids, and so I need something where those crumbs can fall right through these little holes here and wipe down. The leather is durable, but we have others who say, you know what, I really want a cushioned seat so I can sit there for hours comfortably. Know that, and then that will help you make your decision a lot easier. And then also looking at the finish of the stool against the color of the island. I have a really dark island, and so this natural oak works together. I would either contrast them or try to match them. And then I think there's so many options out there, like woven's going to give your house, you know, a more coastal or textural feel. Then there's like all wood or upholstery. Upholstery is really great for comfort, but they can also be more oversized in scale, so just make sure you measure. Just make sure you know if you have a counter height island or a bar height island, because that would be really sad if you ordered a bar stool for a countertop and then your knees will hit the top of the island all the time. Lastly, styling. That is often one of the most fun parts because it's not a commitment. You can always change it. You're not stuck with the tray or the base, and it gives you a lot of flexibility to change with the seasons. My biggest advice would just be to not put lots of little things on your countertops everywhere, because it just creates this mental load when you're in the kitchen and you're trying to manage all the things and cook and clean. I think keep those countertops clean, add a few groupings of styling. Always incorporate a tray if you can. I like to have a tray by my stove so I can keep all of my olive oils and, you know, salts by where I'm cooking, but I also think a tray looks good on an island or a really large bowl. When you're styling an island, usually a safe bet is to do something taller, like a beautiful glass jar or vase, and then something lower like a bowl or platter. Personal touches go a long way to making a kitchen feel like it just belongs to you. You could have the most basic kitchen in the world, but have beautiful collected bowls and cookbooks that mean something to you, a little antique piece of art, and it would start to feel more like home. And so I would strongly encourage to just collect or pick up things as you see them. And I said don't overstyle your kitchen, but a few of those go a long way. We have just scratched the surface of kitchen design today, and we have so much more inspiration on StudioMcGee.com.